आर्टिकल नंबर 7 है टुमारो पीपल है, ठीक है, फॉर टुमारो पीपल कुछ होगा, ठीक है, इन 2016 हो गए। इन 2016 इलॉन मस्क न्यूरल लिंक है, ठीक है, विद द एम ऑफ मैन्युफैक्चरिंग इलेक्ट्रॉनिक इम्प्लांट इन द ब्रेन, ठीक है, न्यूरल लिंक लॉन्च किया, इलेक्ट्रॉनिक इम्प्लांट इन द ब्रेन दैट कुड लिंक इट डायरेक्टली टू द नेटवर्क। ब्रेन में कोई इनको कुछ इम्प्लांट इलेक्ट्रॉनिक इम्प्लांट डालेंगे, सब सीधे डायरेक्टली लिंक करेंगे कंप्यूटर नेटवर्क से। मस्क कंपनी को ज्वाइनिंग द रेस टू बिल्ड PCI, Brain Computer Interface Technology, to leverage it both Meta, Google, and host of neural startups are funded by the Silicon Valley ब्रेन कंप्यूटर इंटरफेस है, ठीक है, ब्रेन और कंप्यूटर के बीच में दोनों मतलब ठीक है। मस्क फोकस होस्ट for a time and diverted by market share and software problems for Tesla and by his well publicized buyout of Twitter. But in May 2023, it was announced that Neuralink had received approval to proceed from the controversial animal to in-human trials with brain implants, ठीक है। तो पहले बिजी हो गया था, लेकिन 2023 में इसको अप्रूवल हो गया है कि तुम ब्रेन में ह्यूमन ब्रेन में कर सकते हो। In order to learn about extensive coverage of the implantation of a chip into the brain of a quadriplegic patient, तो 24 में कवरेज है, ठीक है, इसके ब्रेन में इम्प्लांट किया था वो सून आफ्टर द ऑपरेशन वुड प्ले चेस एंड हिज फेवरेट वीडियो गेम में जस्ट बाय फोकसिंग इन थॉट्स ऑन मूविंग अराउंड द कर्सर, ठीक है, वो अपने थॉट से ही गेम खेल रहा था, ठीक है। मस्क नेम द इम्प्लांट व्हिच एम्बेड्स मस्क नेम द इम्प्लांट व्हिच एम्बेड्स इन इलेक्ट्रोड्स इन द ब्रेन टू रीड इट्स न्यूरल सिग्नल्स टेलीपैथी रिमोट्स। इसमें इलेक्ट्रोड्स होते हैं इनटू द ब्रेन विच एम्बेड्स इलेक्ट्रोड टू रीड इट्स न्यूरल सिग्नल। इलेक्ट्रोड्स होते हैं वो न्यूरल सिग्नल्स करते हैं, फिर वहाँ पे इसे टेलीपैथी बोला है, इसलिए टेलीपैथी। At launch, we explained that Neuralink's main aim was to create an interface to realize consensual telepathy, ठीक है। कैसे काम करता है उसका मतलब जो मेन एम क्या था, consensual telepathy है उसके। 7 years later, the press obligingly headlined the live stream of 7 years later. Hmm. 7 years later, the press obligingly headlined the live stream of our playtest, which his mind is actively demonstrating telepathy. All the later paragraphs of the news stories all tended to severely qualify this. 7 years later, ये पता नहीं क्या है। Tech observers often note that many of Musk's technological visions are indebted to his reading of science fiction है। ये पर्टिकुलर साइंस पढ़ता रहता है, तो ये मतलब ऐसे विजन लाता था टेक्नोलॉजी को, particularly when it comes to rocketry, satellites, and colonization of Mars. These often follow fictional blueprints that are fictional blueprints of that. His influences here are the post 19 his influences is open here are the post 1945 science fiction works that extrapolated futures out of the military industrial advances that had been accelerated by the war machine. His influences here are the post 1945 science fiction works that his influence ये है the works that extrapolated futures out of the military industrial advances that had been accelerated by the British. The moniker hard science fiction. The moniker hard science fiction arose because this vein of the genre was rooted in the cold calculus. The moniker, the name hard science fiction arose because this vein of the genre because this vein of the genre was rooted in the cold calculus. The moniker hard science fiction arose. ये क्यों arose है? Because of the vein of the genre. Because this vein of genre was rooted in the cold calculus of physics or engineering. and promoted as a serious scientific endeavor in itself by the legendary editor of the magazine Astounding Science Fiction, ठीक है, who championed such writers and of hard science fiction as Isaac Robert. इस साइंस फिक्शन के बारे में बात करेंगे, साइंस फिक्शन कैसे रोज बिकॉज वन ऑफ द रोज द कोल्ड फिजिक्स इंजीनियर एंड प्रमोटेड सीरीज सही प्रमोट किया जाता था इटसेल्फ बाय लेजेंड, ये प्रमोट करता था इसको, ठीक है। तो टेलीपैथी माइट इनिशियली सीन, अब इसको ये बता दें, हमारा मेन पर्पस ऑफ टेलीपैथी आई थी, टेलीपैथी माइट इनिशियली सीन एज मच सॉफ्टवेयर, ठीक है, मच सॉफ्टवेयर इनिशियली सीन है, तो मतलब ये बाद में कॉन्ट्राडिक्ट करेगा इसको। Psychological proposition and software psychological proposition tainted with a sense of supernatural. ठीक है, yet both Campbell and Clark were lifelong advocates of the view that telepathy was highly probable, the scientific proof of its existence likely exists around the corner. Yet both Campbell and Clark were lifelong advocates of telepathy. Telepathy was highly probable, the scientific proof of its existence. Like, okay, ये बोल रहे हैं software है, मतलब supernatural है, ऐसा हम बोल सकते हैं. The promise of telepathy soon to be achieved. The promise of telepathy feels very familiar. The promise of telepathy is soon to be achieved and not far off. Only a few test subjects away. Feels very familiar when reading was boosterish announcements on Neuralink's latest breakthroughs, ठीक है। ये बोलते थे बहुत फार पर ये कैम्बेल और ये बोलते थे क्लार्क नहीं, हाईली प्रोबेबल है, तो ये आ गई। द प्रोमिस दैट टेलीपैथी इज जस्ट अबाउट टू बी रियलाइज्ड इज नॉट कन्फाइंड टू एंटरप्रेन्योर्स एंड साइंस फिक्शन राइटर्स। For more than a century, there have consistently been figures in the scientific establishment who have entertained similar hopes. Telepathy would soon reach the threshold of proof, promising everything from opening a new evolutionary promising everything opening a new evolutionary phase of human development to a new psychic front in a global arms race. Telepathy मतलब आ चुकी है around the पौराणिक। The concept of telepathy was first coined in 1882 by the agnostic English poet and amateur psychologist. Concept telepathy was first coined in 1882 by the English poet ने करा था Myers. English poet and Myers suffered a textbook Victorian crisis of faith. Deeply upper middle class son. Myers suffered a textbook Victorian crisis of faith. A comfortably upper middle class son of the clergyman with a wide social circle of artists and thinkers, he was troubled by profound doubts about the orthodox Christian narrative. He studied at the University of Cambridge under the agnostic philosopher Henry Sidgwick, much admired for the honesty with which he expressed his own ethical and religious uncertainties. A conversation with the novelist George Eliot, another principled agnostic, plunged Myers deeper into the doubts कितना orthodox Christian narrative में डाउट करता था, इसमें कैसे टेलीपैथी की टर्म है, ये होता है। A series of personal crises in 1870s among series of personal crises है इसकी लाइफ में, ठीक है। Among them the suicide of his paramour, Annie Eliza Marshall, promoted Meyer to explore the declassive world of spiritualist science involving so-called mediums, often whom promoted Myers to explore the declassive world of spiritualist sciences involving the so-called mediums, often women who claim that in trance states they become channels for messages from the dead. Most famously, raped out in parallel tables, but also quoted through spirit trumpets, scrolled in automatic writing, spoken in direct voice. In higher setting, involving the so-called mediums, that is often women who claim they're in trance. ट्रांस मिल गई, इनमें डेथ हो गई, मतलब स्टेट्स दे बिकम चैनल्स फॉर मैसेजेस, ठीक है, मैसेज ट्रांसफर करते हैं फ्रॉम द डेड, ठीक है। मोस्ट फेमसली रेप आउट ऑफ quality is on that during the beginning, also to get your spiritual person. The portrait trumpets are scrolled in automatic writing. Spoken direct words are even delivered by conjuring of the dead in ethereal form in the dark scenes. For many medium, the one of involving medium, they become channel message transfer for many people suffering religious doubt. A CNC experience seemed to offer empirical proof of survival. For many people who suffer from general religious doubt, the CNC experience seemed to offer empirical proof of survival after death, and as such was fervently embraced. ठीक है। Spiritualism was both a mass movement and a folk religion. Spiritualism का mass movement जो folk religion में था, and it had some surpassing support from men of science. ठीक है, spiritualism के बारे में बात करते हैं, support भी science वाले भी support करते हैं। A co-founder of evolutionary theory, Alfred Russell, evolutionary theory became a passionate advocate of science, so much to the annoyance, became a special advocate, much to the annoyance of, ठीक है, much to the annoyance of skeptical science. हमें इसको पसंद नहीं आया था। The transatlantic telegrapher engineer became a public convert, while leading physicists such as Oliver Rose and Lodge were open to it and sympathetic. Yet, because of the constant association of spiritualism with claim of fraud involving cheaply staged magic tricks and simple-minded credulity, Myers did not publicly announce his own research. And for the constant association with claims of fraud involving cheaply staged magic tricks and simple Myers never designed them. Instead, along with Sedgwick and several other earnest Cambridge men, and Myers was at the core of the group that launched the Society of Psychical Research SPR in London 1882. SPR hoped to turn the chaos. The SPR hoped to turn the chaos of allegedly supernatural phenomena into a respectable ओके, मतलब जो वो इसको बोलते थे नहीं सुपर नेचुरल है, तो उसका मेन ऑब्जेक्टिव क्या था, सुपर नेचुरल फिनोमिना को इनटू रिस्पेक्टेबल एरिया ऑफ साइंस। हमें उस एरिया ऑफ साइंस बनाना है, मैजिक वगैरह करते हैं, स्पिरिट मैसेज, हॉन्टेड हाउस, अनगारंटेड इन्वेशन। एसपीआर लीडिंग लाइट्स, SPR's leading lights did not presume the spirit SPR leading lights SPR leading lights did not presume the spirit hypothesis, but rather suspended it, pending experimental evidence, which meant they split from the broader spiritualist movement. But the SPR leading lights did not presume spirit hypothesis, but rather suspended it, pending experimental evidence, which meant they split from the broader spiritualist movement. They set out to examine and theorize the physical neuropsychological underpinnings. ठीक है, इसमें ब्रोडर से अपने आप को स्प्लिट कर दिया, ठीक है। दे सेट आउट टू एग्जामिन एंड थ्योरी फिजिकल अपीयरेंस, न्यूरोसाइकोलॉजिकल अंडरपिनिंग्स ऑफ साइंटिफिक नॉलेज and sightings of ghosts. In seeking natural explanation for supernatural phenomena, they developed their own distinctive nomenclature. ठीक है, उनको मतलब ये आंसर चाहिए था, इसको तो हमने नोमेनक्लेचर बना दिया, rather than ghost they spoke of veridical phantasms. ठीक है, घोस्ट को इन्होंने अपना अलग नाम दिया, हॉन्टेड हाउसेस became इतना fan- phantasmogenetic centers, places where a previously undetected kind of energy called psychic forms might be at play. ठीक है इन्होंने मतलब रिसर्च कर रहे थे अपना Myers arrived at telepathy ठीक है अब आ गया telepathy by joining the Greek telepathos by joining the Greek ठीक है मैं arrived telepathy कैसे आ रहा है by joining the Greek telepathos to express the idea of distant touch ठीक है it was meant as a neural term to describe communication outside the recognized channels of sense communication को describe करते हैं telepathy neutral term थी ठीक है outside the communication outside the recognized channels of sense. So this might cover message from the unconscious से message cover करेगा और minds connected somehow across vast distances और messages from the dead. Unconscious है कोई मतलब ये कोई recognized channel outside the कुछ channels नहीं है कि ये मतलब बहुत दूर है mind connect है बहुत दूर से across vast distances from the dead से in a period of rapid innovation in electronic science and technology, the press marveled at the arrival of telephones and phonographs that disembodied voice and detectors of invisible waves. In the period of rapid innovation, electronic science and technology, the press marveled at the arrival of telephones, getting a press full of disembodied voice and detectors. Well, the detectors of invisible waves are made manifest. They marveled at detectors of invisible waves made manifest somehow with the magical invention of both X-ray and wireless telegraphy. Many engineer inventors of the time promised that a machine for transmitting direct, unmediated thought was surely not far off. Rather direct and mediated thought. Both Thomas Edison and his rival Nikola Tesla anticipated such a breakthrough in their various predictions about the future of electrical communication. After Myers died in 1901, his posthumous book, Human Personality and Its Survival of Bodily Death, promised that proof of telepathy lay but a handful of years away. ठीक है telepathy आने वाली है physical psychical research never quite made it into a respectable hard sciences. Psychical research ने यही बनाया अपना hard science. Stay at the edges of academic psychology जिसमें American researcher J.B. Ryan reinvented it as parapsychology. Parapsychology बना दिया in his research unit at Duke University where he conducted laborious studies of the statistical probabilities of mind reading using Zener cards. ये इसने रीइन्वेंट किया तो अमेरिकन रिसर्च जेबी रायन आया फिर जी का रीइन्वेंटेड किया इसको मतलब ये हार्ड साइंस पे में नहीं आई ना साइकोलॉजी में भी एज में रह गई ठीक है ये फिर रीइन्वेंट साइकिकल रिसर्च जेबी रायन आया फिर इसे रीइन्वेंट किया पैरासाइकोलॉजी को ठीक है पैरासाइकोलॉजी बना दिया इसको इन रिसर्च where he conducted laborious studies of the statistical probabilities of mind reading. Business study करके कैसे हम mind reading करते हैं using Zener cards. Zener cards क्या होते हैं? These cards have a star wave. These cards have a star everywhere. Closed circle square and लगा ठीक है which test subjects who can't see the graphic side. Who test subjects who can't see the graphic side are asked to guess. Can't see the graphic side are asked to guess. Research Ryan searched repeatedly testing sessions. Ryan searched repeated testing sessions for statistical anomalies that might capture fugitive telepathic powers. She can search repeatedly. These tests were deliberately mundane and repetitious, designed to remove the research from the sensational scene on the scenes. Ryan's book Extraordinary Perception was a popular success, coining yet another general term slightly quickly into general use. Coining yet another general term, coining yet another general term slipped quickly into general uses, but parapsychology as such was fixed as a fringe concern. In his science fiction, Arthur C. Clarke often used the idea of emerging telepathic abilities in men. In his science fiction, Arthur C. Clarke often used the idea of emerging telepathic abilities in men to signal an epochal shift in human evolution. The epochal shift of the emerging telepathic abilities in men is known in his novel A Child's and the overlords contact the human race not because of their high tech, but because they perceive that the development of human psychical powers is reaching a dangerous tipping point. That humanity might start to do damage beyond its own tiny planet. Alien contact heralds the start of a new stage of evolution marked by the awakening of telepathic powers. Humanity will leave behind its childish future. That vision brings directly into the finale of the film, which was scripted by Clark and director recommended film to end it with a vision of psychical rebirth. Clark's interest in telepathy in this era chimed with a wider revival of interest in subject. Clark's interest in telepathy in this era chimed with a wider revival. Clark's interest in telepathy in this era chimed with a wider revival of interest in the subject, driven by curious logic of the Cold War. In the 1960s and 70s, telepathy was bound directly into the military industrial complexes of governments. In 1960s and 70s, telepathy was bound directly into the military industrial complexes of governments east and west. It was bound directly into them. Once again full of new food technology, telepathy was seen as a technology of the self that could radically disrupt the stalemate of the arms race. Because both sides wanted psychic powers could circumvent the nuclear threat of military mechanism once again full of new future from the telepathy was seen as a technology of the self that could radically disrupt the stalemate of the arms race and because both sides wanted if psychic powers could circumvent the nuclear standoff. If psychic powers could be controlled and trained, could spies those defense systems using remote vision or telepathy. This research also got a shiny new name for the new era. It was called Psynics or Psychonautics. In 1960, the Conference on Technical Parapsychology, which invited the participation of physicists, psychologists, and bioengineers from around the world, was held in chaotic circumstances in Moscow. The Communist Party authorities attempted to cancel it, even as delegates arrived. It eventually started what as an unsanctioned event. Okay? The conference made it into the conference released into the public realm some extraordinary information about extensive parapsychological research in the Soviet Union that had been conducted since the August death. After the October Revolution, 1917 Bolshevik heroes of science had researched what the electrical engineers had called biological radio communication. He argued that electromagnetic transmission of mental information over distance is a vital function of the nervous system, and that the human body might be an instrument of biological communication still unknown to contemporary radio engineers. This kind of work had all been shut down under Stalin, but the Soviets, physiologists, and university veteran of that initial revolutionary had opened a new laboratory because name article to explore the possibility of remote viewing and remote mind isolation, we tested telepathic communication between the 63 with subjects allegedly exchanging accurate data over a distance of footage of this psychokinetic medium who spent 20 years in laboratories moving objects apparently by mental power alone was released the state conference. Edward Young, the leading spokesman of the Soviet Science, claimed that the new field of bioinformation was leading into machines. The proceedings of the Congress of published a mass market paper that translated into the English with the title PSI Psychic is behind the curtain. In 1970, the first international conference of psychonaut research met in Prague. The SEC team coined the term psychotronics for the new study into the potential power hidden in the bionics of man. Psychotronics was a less a passive record of spontaneous anomalous phenomena, a model of Ryan Para, instead more interested in theorizing an active, self-directed energy of focus. In the United States, to the national security state developed its own projects. The United States में केवल national security ने develop its own projects for sacrificed states है. इन्होंने भी खुद के US ने मिली कागज central agency MK Ultra central agencies MK Ultra project which looked at the brain motion and the effect of hallucinogenic drugs in willing and unwilling test subjects. Sounds like a wild conspiracy theory, but actually operated under various guises between 1953 and 1973. यही इसका एग्जाम्पल है इन अर्ली 1970s psychist Russell Turk and Harold Potoff at the Stanford explored a technique of projective visionary experience, the term remote viewing, through which a telepath was able to see scenes of tremors. This research program explored the possibility of spying on people through remote psychic infiltration. It is striking that both the US project and its Soviet equivalents were documented in the public domain almost immediately. ठीक है जो कैसे क्यों करा था this suggests a pattern of deliberate release of information and disinformation. Deliberate thing, as if fringe research was now a way of psyching out our Cold War enemies through propaganda, forcing them to commit resources to the same area of research, however, as if fringe research was now a way of psyching out our colder enemies through propaganda, forcing the committers to the same areas of research, however. An article by Puthoff and Turk, Information Transmission Under Condition of Sensory Shielding, was published in Nature. Taking an article published posed the controversy that the editors of Nature had allowed the piece to pass posed a conflict that the editors of Nature had allowed to piece. So Hunter concluded that a channel exists whereby information about a remote location can be obtained by means of an as yet identified perceptual modality. Channel exists as remote location environment. Many of the Puthoff experiments were conducted during a 97 display on British table. The apparent evidence band sponsored multi-entry made in a world famous showman as well as frequent focus of attempts to deconvert many so simple statistics. TV in the 1970s often said decidedly psychic, with Wheeler a frequent guest on talk shows and popular science programs, while Star Trek returns replayed in the United Kingdom, where children television was full of programs about psychical powers such as this was because practically every school child read John novel. It is set in a post-apocalyptic society where telepathic children were persecuted. In this period, any doubt about the value was always offset by a faint future of largely science fiction, whose power and military applications. By 1978, the US had ramped up funding, leading to a secret army unit called Project Target, based at Fort Meade, Maryland, which grew. By 1978, US had ramped up funding and taken leading to a secret army unit called Nickname, based at the Harvard-based team. Maryland, which brought together diverse ideas of experimental psychological operation involving psychic projection, mind control, and remote manipulation of unknown motives. Here, the program was full of the kind of paranoid fantasy imagining the film idea of man, paranoid fantasy of man broken down by psychological torture and order to become assassins by post equity commands embedded in their minds and done effectively by their handlers. These military programs was given the comic treatment in John Popular investigation, which uses as its starting point and experiment in local animals with beams of focus psychics power made lethal by rigorous military. Ronson sees absurdity here. Reporting also tracks the influence of these kinds of psyops in the methods of psychological torture used by but he also tracks the influence of these kinds of psyops in the methods of psychological torture used by US forces and terrorist suspects in Iraq. Project Stargate was in part propelled somewhat ironically by a certain public and open official sanction of paranoia. This was already happening at the time when Judge was imprisoned and had been imprisoned for accepting lectures fee on these postcards of his university in a febrile Cold War era. Silence of threat has only a secrecy and rumors of militarized parapsychological continues across the American specifically Soviets were implemented to celebrate mystification rather than the leaks of UFO invasion by US Air Force. The government using furious speculations of French government documenting UFO landing and alien abduction to hide much more conventional exposition visits. This linking of American paranormal research to the worlds of science fiction and ufology suggests that we need to see telepathy in the context of wider culture, where its meanings were always unstable and unbounded by any scientific protocols. For instance, the telepathy resurfaced in the hippie counterculture of 1960s among groups that often oppose oppressively. Steward SP is published in Italy based parapsychologically as part of a new diagnosis for the universe, in which H argues faculties that have been fettered and limited by the rigid orthodoxy of the as emergent signs of this flourishing. He listed examples of openness to mystic position. Looking back, you can see a pattern in those eras in which interest in telepathy bloomed again. क्या pattern the coined by Myers in his fellow scientific research made telepathy gained traction because it was formed inside a movement of scientific and technological revolution together, where uncanny transmissions proliferated across the visible and invisible spectrum, seeming to collapse the natural and supernatural together. In 1970, the television returned under different names as part of another moment of crisis. The Cold War arms race was an essential part of this feat, negotiating supplemental world of fantasy from mind control to brainwashing and playing and visualization. The cultural critic Frederick James Quinn has argued 1970 is a period when we begin to get early cultural representation of a new world system, an understanding of how interdependent and networked the planet is becoming. This is the moment of instant global satellite communication and the frantic interconnection of what the millions of James sees the popular culture of the period as being full of plots about hidden conspiracies, secret technology, occulted networks. He points to those great conspiracy fields of which about trying to grasp structures of power that hover on the edges of understanding. In the emergent media space, to be increasingly means to be network bound into systems. This returns us to Elon Musk and the use we use citation and telepathy in the context of digital revolution in the past decades. It's not just that we have another acceleration of network communication, but also just individually we had a traumatic experience, the sense of stuff being turned into. Again, that's collapse between those